Maybe to start, if you guys could just first introduce yourselves, tell us a little about your companies, your mission statement, just to kick things off.
Sure. Phil Newell with GoDaddy. I'm the Director of Finance and Accounting IT. My team handles all of the integrations essentially between our internal, external business partners and ERP systems. And so part of that includes the integration with Tipalti for all of our outbound payments. And there's a few other things that the team does, but that's the kind of the overview.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. So I'm Tony Gilharry. I'm Partner Operations Manager at WP Engine. And for those of you who may not heard of WP Engine, we're primarily a WordPress digital experience platform. So a lot of what we do as a company is find agencies, small business, anyone of all sizes that is using WordPress and figure out how to help them deliver a digital experience to their end clients. So we use a bunch of partners, specifically in tech like Google and Amazon, to help provide that service. And what my role is to help those agencies and other partners of all sizes standardize on our platform so they can pretty much build websites and digital experiences for their clients. If you guys haven't heard of WordPress yet, I think that'd be a big thing that's coming here in the near future for applications and all things open source.
Thanks, guys. So to kick things off, maybe talk to us about your partner initiatives and how these partner program that you guys are executing are strategic to your independent company's growth and enabling you guys to kind of drive success as a bigger company.
From a partner program perspective, I think we have two main aspects of that. We have a reseller program, so that is where a customer can sign up as a reseller and resell GoDaddy products via their own branded website, and then obviously they earn commissions around that on the products that they sell. And the second aspect is our auctions platform, where we're facilitating the sale of domain names via an auction platform. And then of course we're having to disperse. We collect the payment for the domain that was sold on the auction, and then we have to disperse that payment back out to that customer. So those are the two big strategic partner initiatives that we have, or the two biggest, I should say. We do have some associate fees, pay-per-click and things like that go through. It's much smaller volume. So those are the two big ones, and I think the volume of business that runs through that is quite significant. It's been ramping up significantly over the last 5 to 10 years on those platforms.
Great. What'd you tell?
Yeah, great question. We have, similar to what Phil's mentioned, we have two programs as well. Ours is for the agency partner program, and we also have a reseller. We have our partner program. We are influencing those agencies to sell on behalf of WP Engine, but we partner together and give them a commission. Some of our agencies can accept commission because these are like top agencies, and sometimes it's a conflict of interest, so they can't take a commission, and there's other folks that can. So we leverage the system to help pay out those agencies who are referring business to us, and then we actually have a really cool way of doing it, leveraging Tipalti, because we do a recurrent payment. So it's kind of like going to like the bank analogy. If you were selling stocks or something, if that's your client, if you sold something, you get paid on it for 12 months. We make sure that we get paid, and then we pay our customer percentage of that. So we're sharing the wallet, and we're actually sharing the revenue with them instantaneously. So
great, pretty cool. So clearly your partner programs are strategic initiatives to both your company's growth. When did the payment process surrounding these programs become an evident thing of you need to address because it was so critical? And what was your initial approach to solving it?
So from GoDaddy's perspective, I think that kind of critical event occurred when the number of international resellers or commissioned resellers and partners started to really ramp up, and we had a huge challenge around dispersing funds to international customers. And the example I like to use is with partners that are out in India. The big challenge there is we could only disperse funds in USD. By the time you send a paper check all the way over to India, assuming it actually gets to the recipient, which is questionable anyway. But then, if they've earned, let's say, $50 commissions for the month, we send them a check. By the time they get that check and they take it to the bank, it then costs an extra $35 to convert it over to rupees. So obviously that's a really, really bad customer experience, and it really limited the amount of growth, I think, that we were going to get in those regions. And it's not just India, it's all countries we're going to have that same problem. So that's actually where we were introduced to Tipalti, and we brought Tipalti on as the solution because of the ability to disperse funds in foreign currency. And that made a huge impact. It really opened up our ability to grow those programs internationally rather than being, primarily just domestic focused.
Yeah, we had a similar trigger. Ours was for the number, it being a net new program for us. We wanted to go back to the drawing board and look at our previous programs and think, what can we have in this perfect world? And for us, it was definitely the ability to stay in compliance. The tax, collecting tax information in a secure manner, and then also making sure that our customers were payable was critical for us, because in our previous program, we have a system that was able to take care of a lot of that, but then we found a lot of issues at the end of the year closing books, and we're about 7 years young, so we've really just started growing ourselves, and we're getting into that phase where it's pretty much exponential growth at this point. There's several thousands of commissionable folks in one program, and then our new program is expected to also have several thousand new payable agencies. So that, to our finance team, was already in the forecast, not something that they had planned for another body or another person. So we had to get really resourceful in understanding how we can get payments out in an adequate amount of time while incentivizing our agency partners to sell for us, and then make sure that we can pay them and be in compliance. We had a person who, at the end of the year, pretty much started in the fourth quarter to start making sure they're reconciling all those tax forms and getting all that stuff out, because we can't close the books. And that was definitely a requirement for us to go into the program, and Tipalti helped solve that out the gate by making sure that we have a compliance check, and that it's easy for our customers to enter their tax information, and they can be supported pretty easily as well if they have questions. So that was something that was just critical for us.
Great. So clearly, your guys' companies have placed a high priority on growth through the partner program, being able to expand efficiently and effectively. Maybe walk through what was the onboarding experience like, and how have your partners reacted to this change?
We started with Tipalti a long time ago in let's say the early days. I think we were early adopters. And so, it was an interesting onboarding experience from a technology perspective. From a partner perspective, I think the reception has been really, really good, from the international community. The ability to select how they want to receive the funds, what currency they want to receive the funds. The way we work the program is our customers actually pay the fees associated with delivery of funds. It's optional, and in some cases we absorb those fees, in other cases the customers absorb those fees. So they can select whether they want the wire transfer and pay the $25 fee or whatever it is, or whether they want to go with a PayPal and only pay 10 cents or whatever it is, $1 for that particular transaction. So giving that flexibility back to them has been really good. I mean, great feedback from that perspective. Previously to Tipalti, we offered paper check in USD, as I described, PayPal and ACH. Those are the only three methods that we supported. So I think a lot of international customers are really excited about the whole wire transfer piece. That even though there's the fees associated with that maybe a little bit higher, but they like that option to be able to get that money in quickly. Some people prefer the e-check method for whatever reason, so they do that. But yeah, overall it's been a great experience, specifically for the international vendors. It's really enabled them to do more business with us, which is a good thing for us, because it's easier to get the payments, and they get more value out of the payments because of even though there's fees associated with it, the foreign currency transaction fees are much, much less than if they had to take a check to a bank.
I think for us, we're very focused on the digital experience of our partners, and we actually leverage Tipalti in a slightly different manner because we already had an existing partner portal, and we wanted to know if one of the reasons why we chose Tipalti is because they were flexible enough to integrate with our existing technology. We didn't have to start from scratch again or how to re-scope things. We actually made 2 spots where we wanted to inject this new experience, and then we were able to do that. So for us, the experience, our partners we actually hear almost like little to no issues or any complaints, which is actually a good thing. People would say, "Oh, that was awesome for us to go fill out that tax form. That was a really good tax form experience," right? But I've never heard
no
of
such thing.
Yeah, no one's ever said that. But we don't get complaints like this thing is wonky or it doesn't work or my stuff didn't save. So I take that as an actual good thing. No complaint is awesome. So the other part of that is the support and the onboarding from the Tipalti side of it, I think, was really critical for us because we actually were scoping this bird in flight. We were like, it can do this. Oh, can it do that? Can we add that in there? Let's do it. Let's turn that on. So we started finding out that it was very flexible, and we were able to improve on our scope as we were going through the project. So having the ability to either have their clients self-serve and go and put all their information into Tipalti as a standalone system versus integrating that same experience within our existing system was critical for us, and it actually worked out really well, and we have no problem with it. We actually get a lot of good feedback when they have an issue and we solve it within an hour or two, and it's primarily overseas, like the WBEN forms and all that stuff, like little small questions there, but.
Great. Yeah,
it's been great.
Maybe just to expand a little bit on the workflow, because we've talked about how the partner experience is great, it's consistent, you're not getting bad feedback from them, but even from a workflow standpoint internally, talk through maybe just setting someone up, transacting, de-risking your independent businesses. Maybe walk through the workflow a little bit from each of your company standpoints.
So, 80% of GoDaddy's business is all on our US platform. So we built into the US platform the vendor onboarding or payee onboarding piece. So we actually use the Tipalti iframe. So we embed it within our system. And that's, let's say, seamless from getting the payee information onto the Tipalti platform. The way the flow of information comes is the various partner platforms, as they go through and calculate whatever the commissions, whatever the payments are. So they send, again internally, we've got an API built that allows them to programmatically send essentially the invoices, the electronic version of an invoice over to the internal system, and then we integrate that invoice. Today we integrate it with our ERP system, which is long and complex, but that was the initial integration that we did. And from there, within the ERP system, we generate the payment and send the payment up to Tipalti, and then Tipalti disperse. We're currently in the process of changing that whole process. We are implementing the bills module. So instead of sending payments to Tipalti, we've changed that around, and so as the invoices come through into my systems that I'm responsible for, we just actually redirect the invoice to Tipalti going forward. And we don't actually put any information at all in the ERP system. So we have no suppliers in the ERP, we have no invoices, and we have no payments. As at the end of each month, as the payments go out on the Tipalti platform, we just get a journal entry or set of journal entries to reflect, outstanding invoices and completed payments. So it's really, from a workflow perspective, AP is out of the picture completely. In fact, my team provides the AP function, which is interesting to have technology people doing that. So we actually provide a little bit of the AP support where payments get derailed for whatever reason. And then ERP is now, there's none of that detail in ERP whatsoever. So it's really simplified. We're actually moving to Workday as our ERP system, and it's simplified that whole integration or implementation of Workday, because we managed to remove a huge piece of complexity that we currently run through ERP today.
Yeah, I had to take out my cheat sheet in those little binder folders and tell you about debits and credits for finance again. I had to go reread through all that when we were going through our part of the project, because a lot of the AP stuff was top of mind for our finance team, and we had to figure out a way to accrue, actually, because our program worked a little different. We have a system where all of our agencies who make a referral to us, after 90 days they get paid, and we do a catch-up payment, and then we pay them monthly. We give them a monthly recurring payment for 12 months. So all the finance folks are like, oh wow, that sounds like something that we don't want to do at all. How do we do that from a technical standpoint? And leveraging Tipalti, we were able to set thresholds, and the onboarding process is set up to go through our website first. Everybody essentially gets tagged. We give them some unique identifier. They self-enroll into the program, and then they opt in for the commission, because if they do opt in for a commission, then we collect their tax form information. So that's where our iframe triggers the tax form. So that's essentially where the onboarding process in Tipalti begins. To the agency, they have no idea. They're just following step 1, step 2, step 3. So when they hit step 3, if they want to opt in for commissions, the Tipalti iframe kicks in. They go through, and there's 4 easy steps for them there. It's they get all their address, their bank payment stuff, and then it says done. And then after they do that, a trigger then flags our internal system that we created that says that they're payable. So if an agency or someone opts in for commissions, we know that they're commissionable, but they didn't complete their tax form. They get sent to like a marketing cadence, like, hey, we've seen you opt in for a commission. Don't forget to complete your tax forms. After they're marked as payable, for us, any commissions that they're doing, we're accruing. At 90 days, an open invoice gets sent over to us to approve, and then Tipalti gets an open invoice paid, and then that gets sent out, and we do the reconciliation at whatever date, usually the 15th of each month. So we can accrue for about 1,100 agencies over each month, and then as you can imagine, every month on the anniversary date, someone's hitting that 90-day payout every single day. And we're going through, and there's a 2-step process. There's a business approver and a finance approver. So I literally help take away a part of the accounts payable process by saying, hey, if I approve these transactions, they've already hit all these thresholds, you're good to go. I've already validated them for you. Go ahead and hit the payment. So whatever the dollar amount is, that goes to our assistant controller, and he funds the account, off it goes. And then if anything, we've already, over our this is our second quarter actually making payments. So we launched in October of 2017, and then after that 90 days hit, this is now getting into the second payment cycle. And what we found was those payment options are really interesting. We knew that we didn't want to do paper checks because of we have about 30% of our clients are overseas and 70% of the United States. So we were worried about them taking paper checks. Same deal as GoDaddy mentioned, as far as those payments getting through, and then us having open having things open at the end of the year, we can't close your books. So we're able to limit our payments to e-check, the ACH payment, and then wire, and then also, I don't think we did PayPal. I think it's just pretty much e-check, wire, or the ACH payment, and then that's pretty much how we help reconcile. And then if for any reason they have any issues or questions, we service the portals, and if on behalf of our clients, and then we will open up tickets with Tipalti or something if we had any questions or any issues. But we primarily take the first line of support for them. But pretty seamless. We have one person doing tickets, so and we brought him on just in case it exploded even further. But again, speaking to the automation and the technology, the impact has been incredibly low. We have one person sending out campaigns to remind people to finish opting in for their tax forms, or change your tax payment, or this is invalid, stuff like that. So,
GoDaddy specifically has evolved its relationship with Tipalti. Sounds like WP Engines, you guys are getting through this initial kind of first year together. Mm-hmm. Where do you see the impact even broader to your organizations? How could we transform the company even further?
As GoDaddy goes through and acquires various companies, a big part of our strategy is probably focused on acquisitions internationally. So what we're seeing is an onboarding of reseller programs in those particular acquisitions. And I think that's one of the dangers of an acquisition, is actually completing the integration. So if we go and spend a couple of $1 billion on a company in Europe or Asia or wherever, you know, there's a pretty good chance that it's going to have a fairly significant reseller platform or you know, partner platform, and somehow we have to integrate that into our finance systems. And I think that's where the way we've got Tipalti implemented today is very conducive to being able to onboard those resellers and not having to run multiple systems. You know, trying to create a global company in the various regions from a finance perspective is quite the nightmare. And so being able to use platforms to automate those systems and get economy of scales as we make those acquisitions is going to be critical. And you know, we've been on Tipalti, I think we started like 5.5 years ago. You know, we're just moving, you know, really integrating more using the bills module. You know, we've kind of hung our hat on Tipalti, to be perfectly honest with you, as a you know, strategic partner going forward for all of our outbound payments to partner programs. We're not using it for regular AP, but these are all around where we could automate the partner programs. The volumes are huge. You know, we're running like $200 million a year through Tipalti on outbound payments. You know, we're running, I don't know, like 10 or we can run 8,000 payments a day in some cases on peak periods during the month. So it's a tremendous volume, and trying to do all that, I think, without a platform like Tipalti to accept the automation and do it all without any manual intervention is, you know, we just wouldn't be able to grow the business efficiently without adding, you know, massive amounts of AP staff to support it. So certainly a lot of it has been internally. We've done a lot of work on the automation pieces, but having Tipalti, you know, as a piece of that overall solution has been really critical.
Yeah, for us, I think that the next phase is really acceleration for us. And when we were going through our procurement process, I remember the most challenging question to answer was, how many agencies or people do you think you'll be paying in the next year? So that having a system that allowed us to be flexible and to move up through that unknown was very critical for us. And I think that's where we're entering. We did, our goal was 400 agency partners in our launch quarter, and we ended up doing like 600, and then we were going for another like 400, now we're at 1,000. So the scale happened pretty much within 2 quarters, and operationally you don't really feel it. So I think that is where the technology really speaks. And again, we still have that one person. So the next phase of our technology, next phase with us and Tipalti is really accelerating the growth, turning on some features like our email reminders and going through all those customizations that are there, and then also figuring out how we can either pretty much just pay more. Like, we want, the more we pay out, the more money we make, because we know that it's a percentage of our total revenue. So hope to have a couple $100 million paid out through Tipalti as well.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a really good thing. But then also roles and responsibilities. I think we're getting to the point too where we can now start having Tipalti is built in a way that we can have controls and set in place where we can have things approved for US and EMEA, and then in Asia and things like that too. So we can actually segment out roles and responsibilities to each one of our departments without having to go look for another tool or another system that's comparable, or worry about licensing and all those other things. It's already built into our total plan, so very flexible.
So now that you guys have modernized your payable operations, we've heard it through like the benefits you've seeked, you know, whether it's process improvements, ability to scale. Maybe talk about it from like a strategic standpoint internally. You know, what are areas that is freed up? You know, you mentioned, you know, you now take on the ownership of AP. What are some other things across the organization that's had an impact too?
I think one of the big things is, as we've just gone through the process, or we're in the middle of a process of outsourcing our AP function to more of a shared services ability, and I think you know, there was a big risk around, you know, onboarding a new shared services organization from our existing AP function, because there was an awful lot of you know, knowledge that what's the tribal knowledge, I guess, within the AP function. And so we really saw a big risk as we moved to a shared services approach, in that information that knowledge was just going to get lost. And so we really pushed hard to migrate over to Tipalti for that specific reason. And that's been quite successful. From a strategic perspective, I think, just as we grow, as I mentioned before, as we acquire organizations, the ability to not incur a lot of additional cost associated with the acquisition from these payment disbursements, these partner programs, the ability to, if you're acquiring a company, you're obviously trying to get economies of scale. And so the ability to acquire without, I hate to say it, being able to reduce the amount of AP required, AP resource headcount required, it's a big factor when you look at any acquisition strategy, trying to modernize, trying to get the economies of scale. And I think that's where Tipalti is going to really help. I think there's some possibilities, but we haven't really discussed those, of looking at Tipalti actually just as our regular AP. We haven't really explored that yet. We've only been focused on partner programs. As we start to have all these various entities, legal entities around the world, in EMEA, in the US, I think that's something that we could look at and say, can we also use the regular AP function within Tipalti for payment disbursements? And, you were talking about the approval processes. We don't do any of that because we've got upstream approvals already in place. We just have to get the money out to the people who deserve it. So that I think there's some opportunities there from a strategic perspective to have, more of a common platform as we acquire these companies. I think there's to be honest, I think there's a little bit of, should that be an ERP function or should that be a Tipalti function, or maybe it's a combination of the both. But that's not something that, as of today, I've really started to look at. That we've got to figure out, we are implementing a new ERP, we've got to get that out the door first. We're completing our conversion over to the bills module, we've got to get that out the door. And then after that, then we can start looking at what new acquisitions are on the horizon, what challenges does that create for us at GoDaddy, and how does Tipalti, as a component of our overall solutions, how does it fit in and what can it do in those situations? I think there's great opportunities there, just haven't spent the cycles to really drill into that yet.
Yeah. And for us at WP Engine, we, since the procurement process was so new for us, we actually went in and took inventory with our finance team and just trying to understand more. We kind of had a meet to learn to understand what they had on the books. And at the time when we were looking to launch our partner program, we were going through, we're actually going through a funding round that we weren't aware of at the time because all that stuff, of course, is under wraps until it's all made public. So we were in the middle of that, and then we're also doing a finance or a packaging, taking all of our internal pricing and reevaluating that, and ended up being a pricing change. So finance had all these things that they were already doing, and we were getting ready to go and add an additional layer of complexity to their tasks, and that's where we started understanding more about what their role was going to be. And then we found, or kind of asked the question, if we can go and find a solution that takes care of all these things and with all the requirements that you guys have, would that be something that we can go and purchase? So that build, buy, and partner adders really came in. And for us, that was a huge strategic advantage for both us in the partner organization and for our finance team, because they didn't have to increase their workload, they didn't have to reprioritize any of the projects that they had that were already prioritized probably at some point and finally got to kick off. And then they didn't feel bad that they weren't helping the business grow because they couldn't help our project. So it ended up being a win-win. We had, it was more of a front-loaded process where we brought the finance team in the procurement process, all the stakeholders very early to make all the decisions, and then we just executed the plan all the way through. And had we not had Tipalti early in those stages at that time when it was very critical, I can see we probably wouldn't have launched the project in would probably just now be launching this project. It would have had to sit down and wait, and we actually were able to do this in parallel by just supplementing all the requirements and bringing them into teams. And then Tipalti literally had, we just had to configure and go and execute all those things with their onboarding engineers and our account manager, which again was another critical piece for us. So that them becoming our strategic partner in the onboarding, the technical onboarding process and the procurement process was a huge advantage for us to get the program out. And Ryan is our director of partnerships. But what was our revenue for?
Prior to going in, so we had triple-digit growth in regards to the percentage of partner revenue that we were receiving, all within from quarter to quarter.
From quarter to quarter, so we would have missed out on that opportunity, or at least, and not even had visibility to it or tracking of it. And through us advancing so fast within our fourth quarter, we were even able to bring forward our sales strategy as well, which was to launch our sales partner program, which then added more revenue. So we're bringing all these projects forward by leveraging technology. So strategically, we literally launched our program a year sooner than we should have. So that was, that's a major impact for us at a very early stage in our company.
That's awesome. Maybe just in wrapping, knowing, having gone through this project and learning all this stuff you have through this modernization effort, if you were to tackle this, again, up front, what advice would you give yourself in terms of, project management, evaluation, kind of, knowing what you know now?
All righty then. Well, so what we're doing, as I already mentioned, we're implementing the bills module. And the reason why that's important, there's two parts of that. So first of all, our ERP system couldn't handle, new ERP system couldn't handle the volume of suppliers and et cetera that we have. So we were forced to make a decision on how are we going to pay our partners because we can't do the same as we were doing before. So, I looked around at what the different opportunities were. Obviously, Tipalti we'd already partnered with them. Things were going well. So we looked at implementing this bills module so that we didn't have to put anything into the ERP system. Now when I look at how we're doing that and how simple it is to do that, I'm like, why didn't we do that 5 years ago? Well, maybe it wasn't available 5 years ago, but I'm not really sure. But that would be, that as I look back at over the last 5 or 6 years with Tipalti and all of the complexity that we dealt with, I'm not going to go into all the gory details, but there were some very specific, from a finance perspective, very specific things we had to do. So we were doing a lot of very complex integration with the ERP system, backwards and forwards. It was very chatty, very prone to failure, and we did have a lot of issues around that. Nothing to do with Tipalti itself, all on my side really. And so now I'm looking, going like, well, why didn't we just send invoices to Tipalti when we started? Because this is just so much easier. For whatever reason, we didn't think of that at the time. So that would be that would be the one thing that I saw, is that it's not that easy to integrate with Tipalti. There's some technical complexity that's required, but once you get over that first hurdle, it's just like any integration that you have to come to terms with. But the fact that we don't have, that we've completely cut all of that volume of payments out of ERP and all of that detail that nobody cares about, to be frank. Nobody cares about, Mr. Smith has got a $5 invoice sitting out there for waiting to be paid. Like nobody looks at it. So why have it all, right? And if we ever want it, we can just go to Tipalti and get it from there. So by migrating all that, removing all of that complexity and actually allowing Tipalti to deal with the details is fantastic from my perspective. We can always get to the information. The tax point is very well taken. Kind of interesting that. I'm not even sure if I'm supposed to say this, but Tipalti, if it was an international customer, we'd ask them to send their W-8s into some email box. And when you compare the number that we receive compared to the number of actual customers, there's a big disparity. So, the ability to enforce the W-8 collection within Tipalti, I think, is a huge benefit from a risk perspective. The tax people are very happy about that. So I think those are, so that's my lesson learned, I think, is you can make it really, really simple. We happen to make it really, really complex. The circumstances were what they were. So that's what, if I was to do it all over again, I'd make it like super simple by just using that bills budget.
I think my advice for, if I had to start this part over, I would think would be more internally for any of the customers looking to purchase or start working with Tipalti if you're not already. If you guys have resources internally, like a project manager, I would engage with a project manager first, or probably sooner than later. I'd start taking on the procurement process myself and started understanding that it was actually a much bigger project, and I had to bring people in a little bit later than I probably would have liked to. So it ended up getting on track really quickly, but when you're in your planning stage and the procurement stage, I think it's very critical to have a massive list of requirements. There's no harm in having all your requirements listed out and then have them segmented by maybe the roles and responsibilities. Everybody who's going to be using Tipalti or the system, make sure that they're in those discussions and in those stakeholder meetings so that everybody feels included when it comes time to make that decision on it. I felt that once we started getting that, and every role in the finance team felt that they were heard and every process was acknowledged, they all agreed that Tipalti was the way to go. So just doing that sooner is probably a good way to make sure that this tool is the right fit for you guys. And then from probably a system standpoint, the only thing I can think about is doing a frequently asked questions about Tipalti sooner. So probably going through the entire process and just being very detailed with creating a branded FAQ about the tools and resources that we leverage in Tipalti, because I mean, I don't think it would be fair. You guys technically have that in your knowledge base and stuff like that, but Tipalti doesn't know what features you enable across their massive platform. So just show something to customers, I think, would be my learning lesson, just showing them all the things that we had enabled and what resources at their disposal with what we chose. So.